The theory of the consumer as a model assumes the agent is basically a rational actor. And so consumer preferences that underlie every decision that we make when we're modeling them have to have certain assumptions going into the action so that we can actually come to some conclusions about what the consumer behavior will look like. So economists tend to use some basic assumptions that often hold. They think of consumers as making rational choices about what they like best, given some constraints that they face. A basic set of assumptions that is often given for consumer preferences is first, they must be complete. Second, we assume that more is preferred to less. Third, we assume transitivity. And then finally, convexity. A preference ordering has completeness, or is complete, if it enables the consumer to rank all of the possible combinations of goods or services. Basically, the assumption implies that consumers can make comparisons against all sets of goods that they consider. The consumer can decide which bundle she or he likes better. The assumption doesn't tell us what kinds of bundles the consumer likes. However, it implies that she is able to determine if one is better than the other. It's really a useful simplifying assumption for the analysis of choices among bundles of goods with which consumers are familiar. Its real intent is to rule out the instances like the one portrayed in the fable of Burdon's ass. The hungry animal is unable to choose between the two bales of hay in front of him and starves to death as a result. We basically say that consumers can make choices. We have this completeness to the goods that we are considering. The second assumption is an easy one that we're familiar with in the world of economics, the idea that more is better than less. The more is better property means simply that other things equal, more of a good is preferred to less of a good. In general, we think more of a good is good. So when you look at a situation, if you see one taco in front of you or a whole plate full of tacos, we assume that's all else equal that you would choose the whole plate full of tacos. Rather simple assumption, but nonetheless one that's important to the theory of the consumer. Here we have the assumption of transitivity shown. For any three bundles of goods, call them A, B, and C. If a consumer prefers A to B and also prefers B to C, then the consumer must also prefer A to C. This logic basically just imposes a logical consistency to the consumer. For instance, me as a consumer, I prefer the Incredibles DVD to a Monsters University DVD, but I would prefer a Monsters University DVD to a Tangled DVD. Although Tangled's a good movie, it's not as good as Monsters University. So, when it comes to a choice between Tangled and The Incredibles, given the logic of my preferences explained prior to this, clearly it must be the case that I prefer The Incredibles to Tangled. It wouldn't be a logical, consistent choice of me as the consumer to prefer The Incredibles to Monsters, Monsters to Tangled, and Tangled to The Incredibles. And our final assumption is convexity. Convexity basically explains to us this idea that mixtures of goods are preferable to the extremes. For example, say you're indifferent between two bundles of goods. Bundle A, where you can have a quantity of 4 of good X and 0 of good Y, or bundle B, where you could have 0 of good X and 4 of good Y. If your preferences are convex, you would prefer a bundle of 2 and 2, 2X and 2Y, to each of the prior bundles, A and B. You want some mixture in your consumption. So the example shown in the picture of 2 hot dogs there. We have one hot dog with all mustard and another hot dog with all ketchup. Assume that you like both ketchup and mustard. One could say that, given the assumption of convexity, we would prefer a hot dog that has some mixture of ketchup and mustard on it to either of the hot dogs shown, one with all mustard and the other with all ketchup. So we could have arranged the consumption a little bit different here given the amount of ketchup and mustard that we had. If we would have went half and half on the first hot dog and half mustard and half ketchup on the second hot dog, we would have preferred that outcome of the use of ketchup and mustard to any of the pictures shown here. Another way of explaining this is essentially that the more a consumer has of a particular good, the less she is willing to give up of something else to get more of that good. The more ketchup you already have, the less you're willing to give up of something else to get more ketchup. You already have quite a bit of ketchup. It's a basic idea of the assumption of convexity is that consumers like variety. All else equal, we would prefer to have a variety.